changed human lives forever, just like sliced bread and internet. A digital revolution, perhaps second only to the industrial revolution of the 18th century, is fast overtaking our lives. It allows us to conduct important banking transactions after office hours, send a birthday gift at the last minute to a dear friend overseas, trade in stocks, order grocery, or even buy books, clothes and shoes. Be it in the busy metro cities, towns, and even villages, this revolution is expanding the contours of our very existence. At the very heart of this phenomenon lies e-commerce, a method of conducting business through electronic means, either through a click and buy over the internet or by using mobile handsets. But selling goods or services to consumers is only a tiny portion of e-commerce, which can also link business houses, individual consumers, government, and individual or even business house and government. It has recently even helped raise funds for startup ideas through crowdfunding. E-commerce has not only challenged the traditional style of doing business, but also revolutionized the habits of customers. At present, while North America accounts for the highest 60% digital buyers, Asia accounts for only 15%. But as per UNCTAD report, the share of Asia and Oceania region in global B2C e-commerce is going to be about 37% by 2018, more than double. A recent government discussion paper shows that e-commerce has the potential to contribute more than 4% of India's GDP by 2020. For your curiosity, there are many proven benefits of e-commerce. These are: it promotes plastic money, which is very good for a cash economy like ours. It raises productivity of smaller enterprises. It enhances information and communication technology literacy, a better regulatory framework and taxation to improve revenue kitty. It can promote India's slowing exports. Let me now take you to our studio where our distinguished guests will deliberate on all possible dimensions of e-commerce and those inevitable set of problems which could prove to be a major deterrent for the growth of e-commerce in India.
Hello and welcome to Simply inTAXicating. In the prevailing gloomy global economic horizon, the only brightest spot which may be seen is the budging e-commerce sector across the globe. Right from Alibaba in China to Amazon and eBay in the USA to Flipkart and Snapdeal in India. E-commerce as part of digital revolution is undoubtedly a big phenomenon, and it has tangibly been expanding the boundaries of human existence. In this background, the Digital India mission launched by the Indian Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi may appear to be prognostic. As per UNCTAD's latest report, the value of global B2B e-commerce in 2013 surpassed the mark of $15 trillion, and almost more than 75% of it was accounted by only a few economies such as the USA, the UK, China, Japan and Northern Ireland. More interestingly, the share of e-commerce in total manufacturing in the USA jumped from 19% in 2002 to over 50% in 2012. Here is a clue for Mr. Modi's Make in India campaign if the manufacturing is to be revived in India. But ironically, too many problems relating to FDI regulations, taxation, cyber attacks, financial fraud, etc. appear to be hampering the growth of e-commerce in India. We have four distinguished experts with us in the studio. We have Mr. Sunil Kumar, the partner RSP. We have Larisa Dhawan from Infinia. We have Brett Stevens from Jaarvis Labs. And of course, we have Mr. V Sivasubramanian from Lakshmikumaran and Sridharan. So, let's start with Stevens. Please give us what is e-commerce and give us an overview of various dimensions of e-commerce worldwide.
Sure, I can give you my definition of e-commerce. Everybody has a different definition. I think the first thing to say is e-commerce is not new. It's been around for a long time already. And my definition is it's anything that can be using an IT platform to conduct business between two or more parties. And if we look back many years, it started as simple business-to-business transactions, which automated the flow of paper from one company to another, electronically using very complex systems in those days. And since then, it's evolved many, many iterations to the point now where in a Western country, we take e-commerce for granted in every transaction we do. And we can even live in a lot of Western countries without cash now because there is so much e-commerce opportunity for us. But my definition is anytime you use an IT platform to conduct business between two or more parties, whether that's business to business, consumer to business, or consumer to consumer now, we're starting to see e-commerce. So it's whatever you can describe as a way to automate a process using technology to conduct business without using paper and money and other media.
Right. So looking at this definition, we have various segments within the e-commerce basket.
Yes.
So maybe can you throw some light on the various segments and which segment is probably heading for a mega boom in the coming years, which is going to leg up the gloomy global economic scenario which we see today. So probably that is going to be very relevant for all of us.
Yes, I think there are different benefits from different segments. So even from a government to business perspective, efficiency in transactions between the government and businesses saves money, saves time. So that can help our global economy. If you then take it to business, there's certainly a lot of cost saving available for business to business transactions. We don't need to write checks and send them in the mail anymore. We do a bank to bank transfer for goods and services, and that takes a step out of the process, makes it more efficient, saves money. And then of course the boom is, everyone is thinking, is business to consumer. How do we save money by not having to have a bricks and mortar business and still sell goods to consumers or services to consumers in an online way rather than offline way? And our companies are investing now in strategies that take us from offline to online. So that is, I think, the growth area, and that's probably the opportunity for India to reach people in an online way for business to consumer.
Maybe Larisa would like to throw some light here, because he is saying one very important point, that e-commerce is all about investing less in infrastructure, saving on cost, in terms of not only infrastructure but also the transaction, for instance.
And also, that's absolutely right. So brick and mortar, one of the major restrictions is your reach is very less. People have to come to you. Here online goes right onto a people's desktop wherever the person is. The reach is right. In India, it could be from Kashmir to Kanyakumari in just one click of a button, as against large stores just being in one metro city. With going online, suddenly the reach is so many times more because of going online. Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest benefit of e-commerce. When you talk about B2C, I think that is where the major shift is happening. Right from home goods to apparels, everybody is now shopping online. Groceries will be the next thing. Like Stephens was saying that, okay, in Australia it's taken for granted. Nobody goes to a supermarket anymore to buy groceries. They save the time. They don't have to go and park. They don't have to go and look for things. They just go online even during their breaks in office, and in the evening everything's already at home and they can do other stuff.
By all these features and the benefits which of course the e-commerce player appear to be reaping, can we say that the virtual space, the e-commerce platform actually provide the level playing field to even a small scale industry, SMEs, MSCs, etc.? Earlier they never had the access to the global market, and maybe the top layer of the buyers, now online buyers.
See, I wouldn't say it provides a level playing field, because internet reach or penetration is still spreading. Though you did mention that it brings your market on your desktop, I would even add to that smartphones, tablets, iPhones, all the other various devices through which you can access the internet and you can access the portals. So yes, the reach will grow, expand as India's internet penetration grows,
but I was trying
and
to
as
look
it goes
at
beyond.
Perspective,
but small scale. But I'm coming to small scale. Therefore, not all of them can have the benefit of being accessed through the internet, through the internet technology. As he said, it's a different mode of doing business. So there is a genuine concern in India that the small scale, unless there are restrictions or conditions or prerequisites of sourcing goods, which it is in the case of single brand retail and multi-brand retail, and government has therefore put restrictions on retail bricks and mortar business under the FDI rules, the foreign investment rules. And that's a point to consider what concerns government has. For the time being, what has happened is the government policy, either before the present government came into power or even today, is that there can be no foreign direct investment in multi-brand retail and single brand retail except under prior approval route, and up to 51% only, subject to conditions. The same restrictions which apply to trading through the bricks and mortar route has been extended by the government to the e-commerce route, saying that foreign direct investment cannot be brought into companies which are doing trading of goods and services in the e-commerce space, because it's permitted for B2B in the wholesale, but not B2C. So I'll come more if there are any questions. I'll take it up to this point.
If you permit me, I would like to ask one question, sir. Why India really needs to go for this kind of artificial distinction, single brand and multiple brand, and why this distinction? So far as FDI is concerned, we should welcome FDI. So far as sectors are concerned, let it be B2B, B2C, whatever sector you are comfortable with, you invest and you pay taxes here, you create jobs here. There is a multiplier effect. Why, sir? Why? Where is the need? Should India really go for this?
The threat or risk is to the huge unorganized sector. We don't have an organized sector in retail. We have, it is coming up now. It is beginning to consolidate and get established, and money is coming in. But government's concern is the huge number of jobs which are there in the mom and dad stores, which are spread all over the country, in the smaller towns, in the villages, which are part of the semi-rural, semi-urban landscape, where you cannot survive if the big business stores have a reach which goes beyond the big urban centers. Though there are conditions which have been imposed in the policy, but the government is not quite comfortable with the idea, and I think they want to do it gradually.
And could I add something? That the thing about e-commerce in the Western cultures is we've noticed that the barrier to entry of small players is very, very reduced now. It doesn't cost much to set up a website, an e-retailing site. We have payment gateways that just bolt on. I think it actually creates an opportunity for small businesses in India and other countries, and it does lock out some of the larger companies. We see the huge investment required to bring a multinational brand into a country. Right. They have to spend a lot of time with lawyers and tax accountants and buying real estate or leasing real estate. If a small business in a rural environment in India that has just basic internet access can start a business, they can then become available to all of India overnight. And that's what we're seeing. There are so many entrepreneurs in India who want to start a small online e-commerce business, e-retail business. And the multinationals have a huge barrier to entry to India. We should take advantage of that in India and let the small businesses flourish here.
Maybe Mr. Subramanian would like to throw some light on this issue, that why there is this artificial distinction between offline retailer and online retailer. Given the fact that there are so many benefits, the offline retailers and online retailers, both of them are reaping so far as policy. Should government really become a partner to all this kind of market scenarios, various parameters which are, or the forces which are regulating the market force?
Well, I'll just put it like this. E-commerce, I look at it in terms of the four major pillars. One is the marketplace, which yes, we are talking about. Second is in terms of the back end supply chain, which is, I think, a very, very important part of it. So basically, anything which is done on the platform has to be finally delivered. See, when it comes to even small players, please understand, unless they are able to, kind of enter into that supply chain, they are not going to get the benefit of the e-commerce benefit. I mean, in the entire e-commerce space, they are not going to get the benefit until their physical inventories and the physical supply chain, they get, integrated into the supply chain of the other side. That's one important part. So how do we really ensure that, the online and the offline kind of the supply chain is getting integrated? Third is, of course, the payment mechanism, which I suppose in India that's quite regulated. Fourth is the regulatory kind of issues. But see, when it comes to regulatory issues, I just wanted to highlight a few aspects of it. See, of course, the most important regulatory aspect we talk about is, perhaps the taxation, which we do talk about, and then, of course, the issues of FDI, which you pointed out. Even there are regulatory issues about e-commerce, which actually perhaps need to be addressed before we actually put them at par. So that is one aspect which I think the government has to take note, because regulatory aspects we still not very sure. Physical goods which are available can be regulated much easier, because it's physically moving from one place to another and it's getting sourced. But I am having some let's say seller in some in some e-space, that is the virtual space, who is selling goods. Now, as far as the taxing authority is concerned, how does he catch him? If the money doesn't come to the state, how does he really catch him? These are issues of regulatory, aspects which I think have to be addressed before we perhaps
will talk about that aspect, because ultimately it boils down to movement of goods, and ultimately what is taxable is that.
state VAT is what he's talking about. So we'll take that up a little later.
We will touch upon that aspect, sir, of course. But I was trying to figure out from the common man perspective that there is so much of hue and cry. The people are up in arms on the street, the retailers particularly. Now we have a Retailers Association of India who recently moved to the Delhi High Court also, crying foul over this, the FDI policy and how the FDI is being abused by some of the mega players. For instance, we take some of the dominant players in the e-commerce segment in India. They have their parent, the mother is in Singapore, and they have the, the Indian brand of their company, which is dominating the marketplace. These kind of things are happening, but ultimately, sir, what I am looking at, not particularly the consumer perspective presently, from the offline versus online, the loss of job perhaps could be one reason which is compelling the government to put a hold or put a freeze on the FDI policy, not liberalizing it. But is it the concern? Because he said that ultimately the logistics side, the delivery side, for instance, e-payment side, all these segments on backward and forward linkages are going to create jobs for Indians ultimately. And the government of India doesn't have any figure, and no state government has a figure that how many people are, as you rightly said, the unorganized sector. How many people are really employed by this, the retailers, for instance, and whether terms and conditions and their welfare is really taken care of by them, etc. Not at all. So far as, e-commerce is concerned, of course, all those companies which are going to employ, for instance, even courier service. So maybe e-commerce can perhaps give a major boost to the India's dying postal service. We have stopped using post office. There is so much of class. How much justified is this class? As a common man, I don't understand. Where is the need for a class? Presently, if there is a major investor across the border who wants to invest in India, what is the method, or what is the,
you mean in the
instrument which
e-commerce space?
E-commerce space.
Well, you have a lot of companies, the Snapdeals, the Amazons, where investments have come in, companies were set up. But take the example of Flipkart. Initially, when the policy was still either not very clear or government was not very clear as to what investment could come into a company which was doing business in the e-space. And Flipkart probably started off by the inventory owned model. And it was doing its business through a foreign investment company and selling goods which were its own inventory. Till it became clear, or till clarity dawned on the government or the regulatory agencies, and some reference was made to the Enforcement Directorate to go into the issue. And this is around the time I think the change of government was taking place.
Yeah, absolutely, sir.
So the present government had this issue examined. But I think Flipkart was smart. They were able to very quickly, very adroitly restructure their business and take the selling part of their own inventory out of Flipkart, because that had foreign investment. And then they have a complex web of companies which have been set up where there is foreign direct investment, but those are carrying out operations, back-end operations, logistics, as you said, delivery, transportation, where foreign direct investment is allowed. Now what has happened is you've unbundled those operations or services, and you're not carrying out your sales, actual sales, through the foreign direct investment company or the foreign owned company, and carrying out those operations which support the portal space. So what did you do? What is commonly being mentioned as the market space model. Right. Now the market space model is very clear that you can do B2C so long as there is no foreign investment. Now what did they do? They've separated these functions and said we are only providing a portal where we bring together the consumer and the seller, right. And we're doing nothing more than that, providing no services. Right. But is the story really as simple as that? The tax authorities started going into greater details of these operations and have found, well, that the companies which are providing services like logistics, warehousing facilities, etc., are being owned by another set of companies which are supporting, say, Flipkart or Snapdeal. So tax authorities are notorious for going around putting together an integrated case and saying, well, all these guys are in it together. They constitute not independent entities or people doing independent operations under FDI. What they're doing is they're actually selling goods, and they're saying this is the same model as exists in India, in which is taxed, the commission agent model. So say Flipkart is nothing but a commission agent. It's charging commission to people who are its customers in that space, and is providing these services through a clutch of companies who are nothing but part of their own operation.
Let me, sir, find out from Stephen that what are the key issues which are perhaps confronting the growth or acting like a hurdle for e-commerce space in Australia?
Certainly taxation is still an issue. For example, in Australia we have a 10% goods and service tax. By buying goods from overseas through e-commerce and keeping them under a limit, which I think is around 50,000 rupees kind of limit, they avoid the 10% tax. So they can effectively get a 10% tax advantage over somebody who's retailing either electronically or bricks and mortar locally. So the taxation issue exists in the West as it will here. I think the big issue to e-commerce in Australia is that there are just so many choices. Now, if you look at the average smartphone, there are hundreds of apps on there. One's used to buy one product, one's used to buy a different service. There's no real aggregation yet. And sure, we go to the larger ones like Amazon and we look for aggregation at that level, but it doesn't really exist properly yet. I think the other issue is that some of the larger organisations in the world are starting to realise that they can't survive without competing with the smaller companies. So we're seeing some very large players bringing in their products online for a better price than you can buy them offline. And, you know, we talk about the multinationals from Asia who are selling electronics goods in Australia. They are able to bring their products into the marketplace at a much lower price than the bricks and mortar retailers. And provided you want to go and do that online, that's fine. So what we find is a lot of consumers go out to the bricks and mortar store, look at the product, check the price, look at the specifications, take a photograph, and then go online quickly, either on the smartphone. And exactly that. Yeah. So you find that the bricks and mortar retailers are spending a lot of money holding inventory, having staff who are very knowledgeable about the products, and end up not getting a sale. The sale is going online. And it's very hard to combat that. I don't know how we could ever combat that. And a lot of people now are charging money to try on shoes, can you believe? You go to a shoe retailer, and to try on shoes, you have to leave a deposit. If you don't buy the shoes from that retailer, you don't get the deposit back. Because if you've gone online to buy them, you know, maybe it's only a few dollars. But
in India, we have about 28 crore internet users. But if we look at the mobile, we have close to 1 billion. Right? So how do you look at the growth of e-commerce in India? Is it going to be that internet-based bandwidth, you know, the broadband-based growth, or it is m-commerce?
Okay, there are two things to m-commerce. One is having a mobile is very easy, but to make a payment for something that you buy on e-commerce is another thing. For that, you need an instrument like a card, or you need to have a bank account which you're capable of putting an EFT transactions through. So till everybody is not carded, or is not capable of using card or making payments on the net or through the mobile phone, your 1 billion will not translate to those many buyers. The buyers will only be people who are capable of paying on the card, because, or cash on delivery is another aspect, right? Cash on delivery, yes, but the 1 billion users are probably based in rural India where cash on delivery is not possible. All these courier providers do not give cash on deliveries to all locations. So that's where the restriction is. But cash on delivery is something which taught a 9-year-old son of mine 5 years back to get, suddenly I opened the door and books were arriving and I was like, who's going to pay for it? He said, it's cash on delivery, you pay for it. That's how I got introduced to e-commerce. Yeah, because they realize it just comes to the doorstep and you just pay for it. Absolutely. That's what my introduction.
Here, the bank regulator, the RBI, has already notified and encouraging m-commerce, I mean the payment through mobile. Right. And you have alternative payment gateway, for instance, a smart card, for instance, the third party. Preloaded for
correct.
Instance. Yes.
Yeah.
So how do you look at the future growth of all this?
I think preloaded is a great tool and people have started using that. But there is a little bit of apprehension. People who used to pay, getting something on credit do not want to preload a card and block their money. So the different aspects, but a person like maybe my help at home might want to preload 1,000 rupees and buy something, but I would probably charge it on a card because I have the ability to have a credit card and pay 1,000 rupees later. So yeah, preloaded is something which is definitely going to catch up, but I still don't think it will translate the 1 billion into 1 billion users on m-commerce.
No, absolutely, sir. In case of India, the financial inclusion remains a dream for the policymakers, for Government of India, for the state government. Recently, the Prime Minister launched the Prime Minister's Jan Dhan Yojana. That was basically a financial inclusion thing. But that reminds me of a very good example of Kenya, for instance. In case of Kenya, it has been recorded by some of the studies that as much as 19% of the total e-payment made in Kenya in 2012 was through mobile.
Yeah.
Because
Mobile
people
is
in
the future.
remote areas,
Yeah.
they had no access to internet, but
Correct.
they had mobile. And most of them were paying through mobile and actually buying goods online.
Yeah.
So
So
they-
that is the future. As soon as, to your point, as soon as financial inclusion keeps increasing, your commerce will keep increasing.
So that brings me to you, sir, that whether the e-commerce regulatory framework should also include m-commerce, or there should be a separate set of regulations for m-commerce.
You'll have to include it in that.
It should be a part
They
of
go
this.
hand in hand.
It should be a part of this.
Yeah, because nobody does one thing on a laptop and another thing on the phone. It's just an extension of the same thing.
Multiple devices.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's all about the portability. You know, you can sit at home at night and shop online and buy something, which might suit you if you're looking for a particular book.
Right.
But if you're out somewhere and you want something delivered to you in your office or something, that's when you start to use your mobile phone. And smartphones use in the West, I think the numbers are something like 1.5 smartphones per person in Australia. So we have multiple. I don't know how I only have one. Somebody must have my other half. But there are there are ways to do it. And provided that, and I think back to your comment about prepayment, I have multiple credit cards that I use because I worry about fraud and being, I've had transactions in the past that have been done fraudulently. So I limit some of my online purchases to a particular credit card with a small limit or a prepaid limit. That way at least my exposure is limited. The banks in Australia have taken the initiative to come up with some very smart systems to stop fraud, but there's still a lot of fraud going on. And mobile commerce is probably the place where most of the fraud can occur, more so than the online commerce in the ways that we looked at it. So we all have strategies to address that, and I think India would do well to look at the strategies that have been implemented around the world and take on some of that initiative from not only from the government point of view, but also from the merchant point of view and from the banking sector.
We will certainly touch upon this.
I just
issue.
wanted to point out one thing in this. See, the question is, as a policy, do you want to encourage e-commerce? Because if that is going to be the situation, I mean, I'm talking about from the policymaker's point of view. If you're going to encourage e-commerce, the way is to encourage m-commerce. Because in India, if you really look at it, the internet access is available. Perhaps are you looking at what strata? If you really look at it in terms of the low cost mobiles, etc., is where I think you really need to be able to allow m-commerce. In that case only it will actually percolate down to the the lower levels.
So maybe sir, after
and
the
which
break,
is really what you have to
discuss
really
with
look
you. We
at.
will start with this after the break, and we'll switch over to the taxation part. And the most vital aspect of the entire e-commerce space is going to be the consumer protection. We will look at consumer protection, and also perhaps in this kind of marketplace where good number of players are coming, selling their goods, and the online buyers are buying it. But when it comes to certain liabilities, who is going to be liable? From the perspective of consumer protection. So is it third party, or is it the platform provider? Is it the seller? Who? Ultimately who? So recently the minister also talked about the class action option in Consumer Protection Act. So we will touch upon all these issues and we'll come back to you.